put together a panel called Health 2.0 2.0 because we were very interested in what entrepreneurs are doing in their second or third venture in the space. Because now we've been doing this for about 5 or 6 years. It makes sense that we're seeing people at different points in their career, having sold companies, started new ones, and we wanted to find out more about their journeys. Specifically starting and selling companies and starting new ones, but also because the perspective of these entrepreneurs is really unique. They've had a chance to analyze the environment around them over the past 5, 6 years, some of them long before that, and they have unique insights as to what's changed and what's coming. So you have a very special moderator for this session. Jean-Luc Neptune is going to be coming back on stage here, and he himself is a serial entrepreneur in Health 2.0. He demoed his startup, Healogica, at Health 2.0 in 2009. He went on to sell it to the Michael J. Fox Foundation, then started another company around second opinion services. That continues today. And he has then joined us, of course, at Health 2.0 to head up our work in innovation competitions, and we're really lucky to have him. So I'd now like to bring up Jean-Luc Neptune and our panel of repeat entrepreneurs for Health 2.0 2.0. Jean-Luc?
But it's great to be here and great to be talking about Health 2.0 2.0. I'm sure many of you, the first time you saw the panel name, said that's got to be a typo. Somebody made a mistake and put 2.0 2 times. But as Indu mentioned, we thought it made sense to really riff on our brand and think about our heritage as a Health 2.0 company and use it as a frame to explore entrepreneurship the second time around or the third time around for people who've already started companies in this space and who have exited and are back for more. Most of you know that there's just been a tremendous amount of activity in this space just in like the last year or two alone. There have been a tremendous number of incubators and accelerators and new venture funds that have been started. And through the work that we've done, we've interacted with hundreds, maybe even thousands of people who are moving into the space for the first time. And many of you here in the audience are probably were doing something else before and saw healthcare as a great opportunity, and you're here to learn more. And really our goal today in this discussion is to serve as, to provide a community service to really help this audience learn more about the lessons learned in this space. And maybe before going forward, who in the room would describe themselves as an entrepreneur pursuing a Health 2.0 type company? All right, very good. Who is a first timer? Their first Health 2.0 venture? All right, so hopefully some good content for you. And I assume that most of the other people here are repeat offenders, repeat entrepreneurs who are back for more. So that's great, and we really look forward to, again, having a great discussion today. And I'll slide over here and do a brief introduction of our panelists. I'll just first mention myself. I'm Jean-Luc. My friends call me JL. I'm a physician by training, got an MBA along the way, and pursued 2 startups. As Indu mentioned, one a clinical trials matching startup, and another was a virtual second opinion startup. And as I've told Indu and Matthew many times before, I plan to be out there at some point in the future, and I'm circling, looking for that next big idea. And to my right, we have a great panel of experts who've been in this space, who have great lessons to learn. I'll do a quick intro. To my immediate right is Doug Hirsch. Doug is early Facebook, early Yahoo, and was a founder of Daily Strength back in, 2006? That was acquired by HSW in 2008. And Doug is now the CEO of GoodRx. To Doug's right is Chiara Bell. Chiara is the founder of Energy, which was acquired by Univita in 2008. Mm-hmm. And she is now the CEO and founder of CareTicker. And I'd like to give Chiara a great shout out here because her clothes were sent to Maine. And I saw her at the supermarket buying stuff so that she could look great and be with us here. Look at those shoes. Look at that. Congratulations.
There's one thing I can do. I can shop. So it was very easy.
And then finally, to the right is Ann Mond Johnson. Ann was the co-founder of Subimo, which was acquired by WebMD way back in 2006.
Way back.
And she is now the chairwoman of CareTicker. So
Connected Health.
No.
Oh, Connected Health. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You can come and join me anytime.
Okay.
I need more sleep. Okay, in any case. So what I think we'll do today is we'll give each of our panelists an opportunity to talk for a few minutes about their background, why they're here, why they're doing it again. And then we have moderated discussion, and then we'll open up for questions from the audience. So Doug, you want to lead us off?
Sure. It's funny, this is my second health startup that I'm in. It's probably about my 5th or 6th startup altogether. And I always felt like I sort of stumbled into health just because I wanted to solve messy world problems. And health apparently has a number of those. So, it's been really interesting. And I think Indu and Matthew have done a really great job of consolidating some of the significant trends that have changed over the last, I'd say, few years. You know, when I got into this business, a lot of it was, you know, wow, wouldn't it be great if patients did this, or wouldn't it be great if the internet provided this, or if mobile could do that. Now I think a lot of those things actually exist, and we're sort of at that new phase, which is, okay, now we're just so much smarter, I kind of feel like, than we were in sort of the first go-around for me. And now, you know, we're seeing a lot more government participation, and we're seeing sort of, I just say, this conference specifically is so much more sophisticated now than, gosh, you know, back in 2007 when I got started, and it was just like, here's health, here's technology, go figure it out. It's now there's actually like a real strategy. So it's fun to be back.
All right, fantastic. Chiara?
So I did energy and met Matthew kind of right when I started energy, and I think it was, you know, before the iPhone and before there was kind of a lot of adoption of some of the technologies. And when I sold energy to Univita, it was great to work at Univita, but I just felt like it's still such an exciting time to really innovate. And I think now that you've got some of the great initiatives from the government and a lot of more entrepreneurs are really excited about healthcare. So it's exciting to kind of go into a second company and try to build another one.
And I think I knew Matthew even before Health 2.0, which is probably dating both of us. And it is fun to be here and to see so many familiar faces, and I really want to commend everybody for going at it again, because I didn't see many hands raised for people who said they were doing this the first time. And Subimo was a company that had focused on helping consumers make decisions, better decisions with healthcare. And when we started the company in 2000, it was pretty clear that when you said, well, we'd like to provide you information about comparative outcomes with hospitals so that you can make a better decision about which hospital you'll go to, people were like, well, why would I do that? I'm just going to do what my doctor told me. Well, here we are, fortunately, in 2012, and things are a little bit different. Again, 1/5 of the US economy, lots of problems, lots of opportunity to change and make a difference, and that's really what we're doing with Connected Health now.
Great. And, you know, I think for many of the people, for all of you on the stage and many people in the audience, I think you realize I've come to learn that entrepreneurship is a career path, right? I mean, you learn with each startup, you know, you learn from the second startup, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. And I guess the question that I have, and I'll start with Ann since you've probably been in the space the longest, I mean, what's one lesson that you've learned that you're applying right now to Connected Health, you know, one lesson that you think is useful for the audience to be aware of?
I've been lucky to work in teams, so I didn't do this on my own. I think it would have been exhausting to do it on my own. And so I've been very lucky to work with people who are extremely bright and creative and dedicated. And I would have to say that the lesson I've learned is the importance of getting the very smartest and the very best people. These are not necessarily people who can't roll up their sleeves. These are people who can jump in and have a passion and excitement about solving the same problem you do. And it's a pretty sizable relationship. I think I talk to my partners more than I do to my husband, which may be good for some people and not good for others. So.
All right, great. And Doug, you know, this is your second time in the healthcare space, but as you mentioned, you know, you're on startup 5 or 6, so you actually bring a breadth of experience, and you also have experience in this, you know, the incredible early internet days, right, with these huge scaling applications. So can you maybe tell us a few lessons, or at least one lesson that you learned that you're applying now?
Yeah, I think I'd echo what Ann said, just in terms of having great partners is key, and especially in this space where knowledge is so fragmented. You know, someone might be an expert on, I don't know, pharmacy formularies, but have no idea how to build a consumer product, and that's one of the problems I deal with. And so really have a good round base of skills to draw upon with partners is key. The other thing that I see, which I just find sort of fascinating, is, you know, a lot of folks go into the space because they think, you know, oh, the world could be such a better place if only, you know, people would do this. But it's actually, I think for a lot of us, the bottleneck is actually the patient. And, you know, just because you can build it doesn't mean the patient's going to take advantage of it. And I think when we look at some of the damage as we look through the companies that have been through this process, a lot of times we presuppose things that patients would do that patients actually don't want to do or aren't motivated to do. And so I'll be really curious, because now it feels like we're seeing the companies sort of dragging, and companies, government entities, everybody's all incentivized to do this great stuff. But I'm really curious to see which one of these things patients are going to actually do. And so I ask myself all the time, is this something that I, in the course of my busy daily life, would actually, you know, take the time to change my behavior?
Got it. And I see Chiara's smiling there. You know, that's a look of recognition. Can you tell us a little bit about what that smile's about?
Yeah, because I think when I did energy, I really, my vision was I'm going to change the world, and change caregiving, specifically, empowering caregivers and families and building this whole system for interaction and helping the aging population. And then I think one of the things for me, and I was smiling with Doug, is that really, what I'm trying to do now is focusing on the customer and your customer experience and your customer acquisition first and foremost before you go build the whole suite of bells and whistles and features that you think, people would want, as opposed to being in the field and spending time side by side in that hospital with that discharge planner or in that post-acute facility with that admission coordinator to really understand, what people would use, how would they use it, and how the product should really work. So, and I did some of that with the first one, but much more razor focused this time around.
Got it. And I think one of the interesting, again, I talk to a lot of people reach out to me, they have a great idea, the first slide always has, market size of 30 billion and, or the 2 trillion or whatever the number is, some insane number. And then, they'll paint this vision of what their startup is going to do and how it's going to change the world. And then, they come back a year later and, they look like they did 2 tours of duty in Vietnam or something, right? And so I guess the question that I have for you, and maybe something that we can communicate to the market here is like, how is the healthcare market different? And I mean, and we could talk about this all day. We almost spent an hour talking about it on the phone. But maybe each of you could take a different section and talk about what you think is different about the healthcare market and what stymies often first-time entrepreneurs in the space.
You get to go first now.
I do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Great. So I think that it's different because there's so many moving pieces in the ecosystem. So I think, people have great ideas around, applications and different products, but there's a lot of key stakeholders that usually have to, participate. So it's not just the family member, it's the patient, it's that ancillary provider, it's that pharmacy, it's the hospital, so it's that whole core. And I think that's different, very different than when you're looking at some other industries, that are out there that are building. And so that, and then I think you have a regulatory component that's pretty critical, and I think now you have Accountable Care Act. So there's a lot of things that need to be thought through in addition to just going and building a product and putting it to market.
Yeah.
I think what's different now is that the enormity of the numbers and the fiscal challenges that we're facing across the board are much more top of mind. And I think that is prompting more of a growing recognition that things have to change. And we talk about consumers taking accountability or responsibility, and that's slowly evolving. It's still not where it should be, but I think what's really different is that we're at a very different level of consciousness about dollars than we were perhaps 5 years ago.
I think I'd echo what these guys were saying. I think for me, I'm used to building a product overnight and putting it out there and watching the internet vote whether it's good or bad. And then I've got this other entity, this weird amorphous thing called regulatory agencies and government bodies and then all these other things that are sort of counter to what you would think common sense would be. And that's just a weird third partner to have in the mix when you're doing product development. It's not a bad thing. Actually, I find it sort of exciting and interesting because everyone talks about Obamacare and what's it going to do. And we were just talking about that, Ann and I, because it's, we both have decided, I think, if I can quote you correctly, that, we want to keep our heads down and just build the best product we can. And legislation will go this way or that way. But we're just going to keep striving for what we think is the best product and outcome.
Got it. And Doug, from the moment that I knew you were going to be on the panel, one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you is, you were present at the creation, right? You're there at some of the, the earliest success stories on the web, right? You're there in the early days of Yahoo. You're managing. How many users did Yahoo Mail have at its peak?
A few.
A few, right? You're an early stage employee at Facebook. You work on their photo sharing project, which is arguably the most important thing the product that they developed. And as I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people, will say, well, do we get will healthcare ever support those types of massive scaling, hockey stick type scaling web products? And I mean, you're there, you live in this space. Do you think that's, something we see in the next few years? And if so, what is that idea?
The first thing that pops in my head is, so back in 2006, 2007, I was building Daily Strength, and there was another company that was very similar to ours called Patients Like Me, which is still around, and folks may know it. And patients like me did what I think most people in this room would say is the right thing to do. They got very data-oriented, and they got fantastic data, and they really, I think, changed outcomes for people who had specific conditions. And yet, I was looking around as a consumer guy and seeing that lots of patients really just wanted to talk. They didn't want data, they didn't want charts, they didn't want what a doctor or any other entity could tell them. They just wanted to have a place, an outlet to converse with each other. And so I built a product around that metaphor, which is let's get that hockey stick of growth. And we had it. I mean, we were probably 20 or 30 times bigger from a reach perspective over patients like me, and that's not competitive, they were sort of different products. But the challenge is that's what consumers wanted to do was talk. They didn't want to engage in all these sophisticated products that we're talking about here. And so it remains a big challenge. I mean, I said it earlier, I spend every day trying to figure out what will make a consumer want to get more engaged with their health. And I do think you'll see a series of products out there, but I don't think anyone has nailed it yet. I'll throw one last thought, sorry. It's just that I think consumers are more willing to share stuff. We spend so much time on privacy, and yet I can't tell you how many people I just meet who give me the whole list of their prescriptions that they take, and there's some crazy stuff. So anyway.
Got it. And Chiara,
No, I was just going to say, maybe we should just do like a woundogram, type model. Take a picture of wound. It's a joke. Take a picture of your wound. Right. Send it up and be good to go and get the hockey stick. No, but I think that it's hard because healthcare, and when you're an emotional event like leaving the hospital or taking care of an aging parent, that like Doug said, you just want help. So it's not kind of that something that someone wants to go to every day. I get that question a lot from prospective investors. Well, this is episodic. This isn't something that has a stickiness of someone's going to come and use your product every single day. And so it's still demonstrating to investors around the fact that, yes, that might be the case, but the value proposition, because the financial impact is much, much larger than anything else. So I think that it's the consumer engagement side still, like Doug said, that needs to be cracked a bit.
Got it. And just going back to your experience with Subimo, I mean, I think when you were taken out by Subimo, I mean, there was WebMD and there was basically nobody else, right? I mean, there was really nobody else, or not that many companies that could do those types of acquisitions. And I think one of the stories that we're seeing quite a bit now is, big companies like Aetna and United, some of their people have actually gone on record talking about, their intention to come into the space and acquire a lot of these companies. I mean, from your perspective as the chairwoman, how do you think about that? And how do you think about, your growth, potential partners, potential acquirers for the future?
I think that, to be completely honest, right now we're not thinking in that direction. We're really thinking about who our customer is, which in this case is the employer primarily, or the health plan, and then their end user, which would be the consumer. And I think that what we're really focused on, and what we have to be focused on, is really building value for them. And I think what my experience was with Subimo was that it was easy to get distracted if you let yourself. So the importance there was to stay focused on providing value to your customers. And if you did that, the potential acquirers or people who want to sweep you off your feet would come along in the process. But it's really, back to focus and talking to your customers and staying, laser focused on that was really, and continues to be, very important.
Got it. And I hope you guys find this funny, but one of the things that I've definitely noted in this space is a strange gallows humor for people who are in the space. I remember doing my clinical trial startup with my partner, and when times were tough and we couldn't convince pharma companies to buy what we were selling, we used to quote Alec Baldwin's soliloquy from Glengarry Glen Ross. It's a tough racket. We used to say that all the time. And even in our discussion,
I was thinking of the other lines.
Well, some of those are probably not for this audience, but as we were talking, I definitely heard in your voice like this notion of I'm back in this space. I'm excited to be back in this space, but I have no idea what I'm doing back in this space. So, does anybody want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I think it's the concept of cheating death. I mean, it's really, you see it with every, people climb mountains and they go back and do it again. I mean, what's that about? So for me, it's really cheating death.
Okay.
So.
All right, very good. All right, anybody else with a perspective?
I kind of agree. I think it's like Practice Fusion CEO says, it's definitely a form of, self-abuse and addiction. And he put up this picture at the DC to VC of if you're an entrepreneur in healthcare, just this is what you are and what you're going to look like, and it's a person passed out on the curb, like bleeding, and it feels like that some days. And there's a lot of people in this audience that I've made phone calls to, and early hours in the evening around that. But I think what drives us, or at least for me, is that I do feel, especially now, that all of the players are coming together, from the payers, from the government, and then on the consumer side. So I think it's a much better trajectory and a really exciting time to be back in the ring and try to innovate and build something that at the end of the day we will start seeing that hockey stick go up, I think.
Got it. And Doug, I mean, in the early days of Facebook, right, maybe before we realized it was going to be a $100 billion company, was there this type of, this sense like I'm back in it and I have no idea why I'm here? I mean, obviously many of the engineers there were young engineers, right, kids right out of college, so they had no prior experience. But in your time there, I mean, did you ever get that feeling?
Oh boy. I think the analogies are the same for me. I mean, it's a lot of late nights. It's a lot of every decision you make, you think you're screwing up the company and it's going to go off the cliff. And so I think there's a lot of the same motivations, regardless of whether you're building a consumer experience like that or a health-related product like that. But the essence of both Facebook and I think all the companies that we're talking about are the same, which is this ugly, messy thing that we just want to fix. I'd like to think that's why everyone in this room is here, is because everyone ultimately sees that there's just this sprawling mess that someone needs to fix, so it may as well be me.
Got it. Great, and another theme or another thing that I hear a lot about or people talk about is that technology is not the problem, right? Maybe 5 years ago, technology was the problem. Matthew was talking about 10 years ago where a Sun server might cost you $250,000. I mean, it seems like the technology has evolved, and a lot of people talk about the problem being something other than technology, and I think we've alluded to that. But do you want to talk about maybe a key issue that you think you could fix, or a key bit of leverage that we could exert that might get the ball rolling more quickly? Ann, you want to talk about that at all?
I'll let these guys take a shot. I'll conclude with something else related.
Chiara?
What's that little lobby over the neck?
Good. So don't mess up, right?
What was the question again?
Jen, if you could change one thing, right? If you think about all the different bottlenecks that prevent you from being the next Facebook or the next whatever great company, if you could identify any of those bottlenecks and shift them, change them, what do you think is the one big thing that gives you the most leverage?
I mean, this is going to sound really corny, but I think that you get people to really believe in themselves and in their health care, because I think health is wealth. And when I look at all the problems that we're trying to fix, a lot of it does come back to us as patients and consumers, and a lot of products are built for the provider side and the payer side. But I think it's interesting that we have to do a government challenge around just getting people to make their follow-up appointment when they're discharged from the hospital for a major surgery. So I think that if we can engage, get people just really loving themselves and their health as much as uploading a photo on Facebook, I think we would fix some of the bottlenecks.
Got it. And Doug, again, there are a whole bunch of constraints that you didn't face at a consumer web company. Right. What's the one constraint that if you could eliminate it tomorrow, do you think could make a big difference?
Well, I'll tell you about a constraint that I thought I was going to have that I don't have this time around, and that is that people have been amazingly helpful throughout the process. I'm a naturally cynical person, and I just assume someone's out to stab me in the back if they can, which is terrible, and there's medication for that. But I just assumed that whenever I'm talking, honestly here at Health 2.0 of all places, I walk around this room when I was here in September, and I got a new employee out of it. I got 10 new business relationships, and people across the spectrum who I kind of go up to them shying away, expecting them to stab me, and actually people have been really forthcoming. And so I would say there was a big hurdle. Like with Daily Strength, I felt like, everyone was like, well, how much money can you make me, and what are your CPMs? And now I feel like actually it's moved the other direction, where there's just this combined agreement that we are all ultimately in some weird shape helping each other. It's sort of anti-capitalistic almost, and it's kind of refreshing. So That's the opposite of an answer to your question, but that's what I'm seeing.
Good.
So.
And before we get to Ann, I mean, one of the things that I'll say, we interact with a lot of other people in this space. We're actually, the New York office is co-located with the Blueprint Health team, and we were in their space with their inaugural class. We know the startup health guys well. They're in New York as well. And I think one of the big things that I've always talked to them about, I think that we're still in the early stages where it's all about collaboration making the pie bigger, and maybe to some extent that's the phenomenon that you're seeing. People are realizing that we get a lot more by making this pie bigger, and we can worry about market share in the future, but maybe that's the phenomenon you're seeing. And your point you were going to make before.
Well, obviously these guys have raised the discussion so high. I'll just one comment, which is I hope that what happens is the amount of energy and excitement that we've seen with mobile apps will really begin to make a difference for people. I think that there's been more buzz and hype around them as opposed to actually delivering yet, and so I'm very excited to see that evolve in terms of technology.
Okay. Sounds good. So, 5 years ago, we convened the first Health 2.0 conference. I actually didn't attend that conference, but I think I attended 2008 was my first year. I think there was a lot of pessimism about what new technologies could do, and I think there were a lot of people who had opinions about where we'd be. And 5 years later, we're convening multiple conferences around the world, talking about actually how much has changed. So for you guys, as you think about your businesses, right? So, and I used this line in a previous panel. Wayne Gretzky, great hockey player, never talked about skating to where the hockey puck was. He thought about where's the hockey puck going to be. So as you think about 5 years from now, and again, think about it within the context of your business. Help us understand what are you skating to? What does the future look like?
That's all Ann. That's all you.
Is that me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one fun exercise to do when you're visioning on the future is to sit down and write a headline of what you would see on the front page. Now I'm really dating myself. A newspaper, God forbid, in paper. So
What's
maybe
that?
you'd see. Yeah, I know. So what you would see about your company or what you'd see about the industry. So I think that it's really fun to think about it, and I think that what we'll find with our business is that consumers are going to begin to think about insurance and protecting their health and protecting their wealth and their assets differently than they ever have before. Notwithstanding the fact that many Americans unfortunately are a couple of paychecks away from being out of their home, I think that this is going to evolve, this is going to change, and you're going to see a new level of engagement and accountability with consumers.
Okay.
I think the younger generations are going to demand much different innovation, and they're gonna demand kind of what they've grown up in, which is really a Facebook world. I see with my young kids that they're growing up, so I think 5 years from now, it's just gonna, you're gonna have to see a lot more automation. I think people are really comfortable with sharing, so I think you'll see that the privacy constraints opening up a little bit.
I'm sure it's been said 100 times here, but to me, it's very clear that consumers are starting to take control of their own health, right? I mean, whether it be in the form of HSAs or high deductible health plans or more transparency across all different parts of health. The reality of it is that, just in conversations I'm having with my own peers or my parents where, they're realizing that they shouldn't have, paid $300 for that lab test, or those drugs shouldn't have cost that much, or that doctor is not, on my plan, is that people, for better or worse, and it's kind of an ugly situation, are getting resigned, I guess, to the fact that they need to play a greater role in their healthcare choices. And we hear it over and over again, but if you think forward 5 years, there's a lot of really interesting businesses that come out of that when a consumer is actually starting to direct their own healthcare. And that's not just, throwing ads up like, hoping a consumer will try your drug instead of someone else's drug. It's where a consumer really is actively managing their daily health choices, because if they don't, then no one else will, and it'll cost them a lot of money.
Got it. And let's talk about consumerism, because I think that's really important. I think consumerism, and I'll talk about one specific thing that I think is a big untold story, but I think consumerism has potential to change the health system in ways that we can't really even understand now. And obviously, I think there's a provider side as well, right? Putting providers at risk, changing the payment model and the formula, et cetera. But I think that a big story that hasn't been told or that people aren't necessarily paying attention to is the move toward, high deductible health insurance plans, and, consumers actually having to go to the market to spend for their care. So I'll share a personal story. I was a college athlete. I have a persistent back pain problem, and I had a doctor who, assumed that I had regular health insurance and said, hey, just go over to this MRI place and get your back scanned. And, I went over there as somebody with a high deductible plan, and I found out that's $1,500. And I was like, my goodness, that's a lot of money. And what I realized, it really fundamentally changed how I thought about going out to purchase that. And to be honest, I haven't gotten the MRI yet. I figured out how to tough it out. So, from your business models, do you see, those high deductible plans, do they fit into what you're doing? Does that consumer spending his or her own money fit into what you're doing?
Well, clearly that fits into what we're doing in terms of purchasing in plans. And I think that, unfortunately, high deductible health plans have gotten a bit of a bad rap because consumers are looking only at the premium. And in the context of the premium, and if you're trying to save dollars, that can be very attractive. And what we've done is really help consumers understand their total financial exposure, their total risk. And if you begin to look at premium combined with the other out-of-pockets, the $1,600 MRI or whatever it is, and add that up, it may not be a good deal for a family of 4, or it may be a good deal for a family of 4. But to go through that exercise and make it easier for people, because honestly, I'm sort of a smart person. I'm pretty old. I do it every year, select health insurance. It's still really difficult. So our job is to make it easier and help people understand all the dollars involved.
My company was founded on exactly that experience. I walked into a drugstore, it was $600. I walked into another one, it was $800. I walked into a third, the pharmacist told me to screw off. He was too busy to give me a price. That was the beginning of my company right there. It was just seeing a crazy inefficiency as I was trying to take control of my healthcare and saying, this can't be this way, that shouldn't work like that. So, yes, that's my answer to that.
All right, and then maybe one more comment from Chiara, and then we'll go to some questions.
So CareTicker definitely is focused 100% on the consumer model around, discharge planning. And what I saw in the marketplace was everyone was really focused on the provider, the hospital, and the post-acute. But I sat back and I thought, but there is some accountability here on the patient side, around kind of just doing the things that need to get done when you get home. Now, we'll help you, but, there's got to be some level of accountability, and how can we make that happen for you and be kind of your co-pilot in doing that. So, kind of just flipping it to putting some of the piece. And I think when you look at some financial reforms that are happening around, whether it's ACO or, fully capitated models, you're going to see the consumer play in that much more significant than under the traditional fee-for-service model today. So I think that's really where it's really, really important to focus on.
Got it. And again, as I think about startups in the future, one of my big theses is that consumers are going to have to spend their own money soon. They don't have any of the tools needed to do so, and there's a lot of opportunities that emerge out of that. So, great. So we have a few minutes left. I think we're standing between you guys and cocktails, or at least some kind of refreshment. So Matthew Holt is roving around with the microphone back there. So do we have any questions as we bring up the house lights? Do we have any questions for our panelists in the front row?
That was right down in the front. And I hope you're not going to ask Ann why she didn't sell a company for $435 million yesterday. Say your name.
Hi, Mark Tomizawa, and I'm part of a consortium of people cross-generation, cross-platforms, cross sectors. What we're finding is a lot of this stuff is due to misunderstandings, and we heard that earlier today, that somebody said, well, it'll all work once the physicians die. The current ones, or the people at the tops of organizations let go of old models. And so a lot of this is actually cultural, and I think that's been echoed by what you've been saying, and I think you're doing a brilliant job of accelerating the picturing of a common model where people can start to understand what to work on together, what makes sense. I've also had the health experience that you had walking into the drugstores. So my question is, who's making a concerted effort that goes beyond the coding to address the cultural issues that are the root of a lot of these problems within organizations as well as between them?
Go
You keep on lobbing them over to me.
Yeah.
I mean, culture. I think that's a great question. I think it goes back to the consumer engagement and kind of changing some of the behavior thinking around who's to blame or what is the problem here. So I think it's again branding around your product and really kind of the consumer side. I don't know if I did. I think I kind of stumbled over that one. I'll give it back to you.
Okay, I'll take a shot at it. Culture is a very difficult thing to change. So I think it really comes from the leadership. I think that you are seeing a lot of changes. It may be nomenclature more than anything else, but it's like water dripping over time. It's going to change things. I don't think it's fair to say, let the physicians die at the top, the old ones die off, and the new ones come in. I think that everyone has an investment in a culture and changing the culture, and they should.
I guess for me, I feel like things get bad enough where people have to change, And I've spoken to a number of doctors just in the last 3 or 4 days where they're just like, I cannot continue to operate this way. So it's not that it's the greatest answer. It's just that I think the problems have gotten severe enough, and I think there's a lot of areas of government where this applies, where they're just you're resigned to change because otherwise it just is broken permanently. And so that's sad, but it's also an opportunity. And hope companies like ours, I hope, are going to exploit that opportunity.
In the back row, Matthew.
Typical, front to the back.
Run, Matthew,
I
run.
could run, or actually, let me ask a question while I'm getting there. This is actually about the $435 million that Extend Health got from Towers Watson yesterday. It's also about the $100 million that Castlight pulled down a few months ago. I believe everything that Indu and I said about people getting faster, quicker, better profitability, potentially at lower dollars. But there's been, since 2006 and 2007 when we started this, there's been the question of, is this a bubble? Is this, like 1999 all over again, et cetera, et cetera? And, you were there the first time, Ann. What do you think about and feel when you see those kinds of numbers happening this quickly in the sequence? So I just want to get your sense about that. And is that a good or a bad thing for this space as a whole?
I always use my Health 2.0 conferences as my, markers of the state of health technology. And if I look back to some of the previous conferences, I felt like, I don't know, a good 40 to 60% of the companies that I interacted with at these conferences were really features, not companies. Like this one's great at tracking diabetes, or this one's great at, doing whatever. And nothing is wrong with those products per se, but I don't know if those are sustainable companies that should be raising a $5 million note with a $40 million cap, right? So, I feel like we always like to think we're smarter, and who knows, but I'd like to think that people are better understanding now that an app does not make a real company, or a small feature set does not make a viable business 10 years down the road. Except mine.
Matthew.
Hi, my name is Connie Kwan with realmeals.com. I'm a first-time entrepreneur in the health space, and I'm wondering if you have any advice for me, given that our product's working on prevention and wellness, and the industry as a whole is still very much focused on disease management at the moment.
My advice would be to get a client and do what you can to get in somewhere and prove what you're doing is going to make a difference to their organization and to their customers. I think that, yes, there's a lot of the industry that's focused on disease, but there is a lot of activity in prevention and wellness as well. And so it's difficult to cut through the clutter. I would also encourage you never to get discouraged, or to remember that when it's bad, it's never as bad as it seems. And when it's good, it's never as good as it seems either.
Yes, and also remember the highs will be very high and the lows will be very low. Very low. Very, very, very low.
Like you could lose your clothes.
Yeah.
Oh, we have one more question over here.
Hi, I'm Raj Lakhanpal. I have a question. In my experience in the past, I was involved in a company, and we know, that in the consumer, if you have an incentive, the participation goes much higher. You take away the incentive, the participation goes much lower, 2 to 4%. And then you look at Google Health, you look at Microsoft Amalga, they've all changed their business models or shut down. Why do you think things would be different with the consumer this time around, unless they have financial stake? Is there anything else that would make it different for them?
That would do it for me, financial stake. I would say that would be a primary driver that makes it different.
I mean, I think the financial driver is the only thing that will affect almost every consumer, right? And I think to some extent that, I don't want to offend people who are into gamification, but I think gamification is a proxy or a substitute for the fact that a lot of people aren't really exposed to the pure financial aspects, right? But I think that when it's your money, again, my experience, I'm N equals 1, but when it's a $1,500 MRI and it's going to come out of my pocket.
My back is feeling great.
I feel great. I feel great. I don't need an MRI for another 2 years, but if I do need that MRI, I'm going out there and I'm shopping, right? So,
correct.
Again, just my perspective on that one.
Well, I think that the financial incentives on the payer side as well is kind of shifting, from volume-based driven care to kind of the value-based. So I think when you look at the payment models are kind of playing, so that's where all three are kind of coming together, where it's really the right time to start, looking at those incentives.
You have time for one more? Jill, over here. It's Neil Agate.
Hi, Neil Agate with Kinergy Health. I actually have one main question, but Doug brought up a point that I'm curious about, and one that we haven't actually found is the idea of being a feature, or I guess I look at it more focused rather than general, but both in regards to investment, how you got investment. I'm also have been involved with multiple organizations, but this is really the first one in healthcare, and a lot of the investors that I've gone back to just don't seem to understand healthcare. And I think most of you are on the West Coast, and there seems to be a lot more healthcare-focused investors on the West Coast, and I'm not sure if you've had success with both or how you've gone about raising funds.
I personally, with our companies, we've done angels, and these are not necessarily people focused on healthcare, but they're focused on the team, the market.
I've kind of done some strategic investments with strategic partners that are key to the model that I'm doing.
I think when it comes to seed funding, at least for us, it's just illustrate a really, really messy problem and how you plan to fix it. And there's enough cash out there, especially these days, that people who can believe in you as a person will say, this problem's too messy. They'll throw some money at it just on the flyer that you can figure it out.
Right.
The next stage, of course, will be more complicated because then you have to prove that you actually did figure it out.
And you actually have a business model around it.
And you have a business model.
Right.
All right, and I think with that, that's the end of our time. I'd like